Welcome everybody to your workplace webinar this afternoon. We are going to do a quick poll to find out who our audience is. So if you can just answer the question on the screen. Are you a manager or line manager? Are you an employer or a dyslexic employee? And while you're doing that, I'm just going to go through very quickly what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to try and give you a quick understanding of dyslexia, what it is and how it can affect adults in the workplace. We'll look at those indicators that you need to be aware of in adults, how a dyslexia can impact work, some reasonable adjustments before finally how the BDA can help, because it's not just about today's 1 hour webinar, it's this ongoing relationship that we would like to extend to everybody. While I remembered, if you need to, you can turn on the closed captions if you need it, or the transcription in the 3 little dots at the top of the screen. Let's have a look at our poll results, if we've got those. Yeah, so we've got 66% line manager or manager, 17% employer and 35% dyslexic employees. So welcome everybody who is joining us today. So what I want to do is I want to give you a little whistle-stop tour of how to understand what dyslexia is and how it can affect you. We want to start off on a positive note because it can be a real positive to be dyslexic. There's around about 10% of our UK population who is dyslexic, which equates to around about 6.5 million people. Some people may suggest that it's up to 20% because there is a section of the population who are undiagnosed, who just have classed themselves as having literacy difficulties. There is men and women equally affected, and there is a genetic link. So if you have a look through a family tree, then there will be varying degrees of dyslexia within there. But if I just want you to just have a look at some of these famous people. These are all thought to have been dyslexic or neurodiverse. And the message here is that being dyslexic should never hold you back from being successful in whichever niche area that you'd like to go into, whether it's sports or science, architecture, the arts, politics, public speaking, singer-songwriters, inventors, all of these different niche areas that you would feel that you have a particular skill for. And this is a real positive message that we need to give to everybody, to say that regardless of any challenges that you may face with literacy, you will still have these other niche skills that you can focus on and become very successful in that area. This is a real life success story. This is Father Martin. He is a local Catholic priest where I live, and he told me that he had a very challenging childhood in school. He found out he was dyslexic at the age of 9, but he had a really supportive family. His brothers and sisters would really help him with his reading when he was a child as well, and he was never afraid to ask for help. But he found he naturally had an ear for languages. He's travelled to many, many places. And in fact, he has been drawn to use sign language in different languages around the world. And so what he does is he travels around to deliver mass to the deaf communities. And he's been to places like Hong Kong and Sydney. But his message is just never give up and never, you never stop learning. He says he's 62 at the moment and he's still learning. So that's a real success story that I have encountered, and I've met him. He's a lovely fella. But the positive strengths that you may want to look at for dyslexic adults, we're looking at a cluster of some of these, not all of them. So the ability to visualize, very often in 3D, those practical and problem solving skills, lateral thinking, being able to see the bigger picture, good visual spatial awareness often, that creativity, the ability to think outside of the box, very often good verbal communication. And you may notice that good verbal communication is better than the written communication. And high levels of motivation and persistence, and that might be because some adults may feel that they need to mask their challenges. That motivation, that persistence, sometimes you'll notice that your colleagues may start work much earlier than everybody else. It's a quieter time in the morning, or they may stay later at the end of the day because it's quieter then once everybody has left the office, for example. And so they try to find these different ways of these strategies to help them cope with day-to-day life. Some statistics that you might want to consider. There has been some prison-based studies that suggest that there's around about a 30% of dyslexia in our prison population. And you know, from the 10% that we know of in our general population, it's a real hike up into the prison population. Depending on who you talk to or which study you read, some suggest that it's up to 60%, because again, there's that section who are undiagnosed. And this begs to question really why our education system isn't suitable for some of our dyslexic learners, and they unfortunately find a different pathway through life. On the other side of that, however, there is studies to suggest that there's a huge amount of success within the dyslexic community as well. And in a survey of 69,000 self-made millionaires, then 40% of them found they were to show signs of dyslexia. And so we need to, as a society and from the BDA's point of view, is to try and shift mindsets for those people who are finding out that they are dyslexic, that they can be successful and there is a positive to it. And we want to try and shift those statistics so that there are more success stories. I've got a very quick video to show you, and this will illustrate dyslexia beautifully to help you understand.
Take a moment to read the following. How was that? Frustrating? Slow? What were those sentences about? They're actually a simulation of the experience of dyslexia, designed to make you decode each word. Those with dyslexia experience that laborious pace every time they read. When most people think of dyslexia, they think of seeing letters and words backwards, like seeing B as D and vice versa, or they might think people with dyslexia see saw as was. The truth is, people with dyslexia see things the same way as everyone else. Dyslexia is caused by a phonological processing problem, meaning people affected by it have trouble not with seeing language, but with manipulating it. For example, if you heard the word cat and then someone asked you, remove the C, what word would you have left? At. This can be difficult for those with dyslexia. Given a word in isolation like fantastic, students with dyslexia need to break the word into parts to read it. Fan-tas-tic. Time spent decoding makes it hard to keep up with peers and gain sufficient comprehension. Spelling words phonetically like S-T-I-K for stick and F-R-E-N-S for friends is also common. These difficulties are more widespread and varied than commonly imagined. Dyslexia affects up to 1 in 5 people. It occurs on a continuum. One person might have mild dyslexia, while the next person has a profound case of it. Dyslexia also runs in families. It's common to see one family member who has trouble spelling, while another family member has severe difficulty decoding even one-syllable words like catch. The continuum and distribution of dyslexia suggest a broader principle to bear in mind as we look at how the brains of those with dyslexia process language. Neurodiversity is the idea that because all our brains show differences in structure and function, we shouldn't be so quick to label every deviation from the norm as a pathological disorder, or dismiss people living with these variations as defective. People with neurobiological variations like dyslexia, including such creative and inventive individuals as Picasso, Muhammad Ali, Whoopi Goldberg, Steven Spielberg, and Cher, clearly have every capacity to be brilliant and successful in life. So here's the special way the brains of those with dyslexia work. The brain is divided into 2 hemispheres. The left hemisphere is generally in charge of language and ultimately reading. while the right typically handles spatial activities. fMRI studies have found that the brains of those with dyslexia rely more on the right hemisphere and frontal lobe than the brains of those without it. This means when they read a word, it takes a longer trip through their brain and can get delayed in the frontal lobe. Because of this neurobiological glitch, they read with more difficulty. But those with dyslexia can physically change their brain and improve their reading. With an intensive multisensory intervention that breaks the language down and teaches the reader to decode based on syllable types and spelling rules, the brains of those with dyslexia begin using the left hemisphere more efficiently while reading, and their reading improves. The intervention works because it locates dyslexia appropriately, as a functional variation in the brain, which naturally shows all sorts of variations from one person to another. Neurodiversity emphasizes this spectrum of brain function in all humans and suggests that to better understand the perspectives of those around us, we should try to not only see the world through their eyes, but understand it through their brains.
So you can see that there are literacy difficulties with dyslexics, but it's not just about literacy difficulties. Dyslexics also have a challenge with their memory shelf. We all have a memory shelf at the front of our brains, and whether you're conscious of it or not, when you're looking for or thinking about something, you kind of look up, and it's your eyes unconsciously trying to find the information on your memory shelf. Non-dyslexics may be able to hold on to about 7 or 8 books on their memory shelf. Dyslexics, however, may only be able to hold on to about 2 or 3. And then if you add a new one, the first one will drop off. Different books have different weights. So if you give lots of pictorial images, there is more books that be able to fill on the shelf. Stress, however, is a really heavy book, and it will just knock everything off. For example, if you ask somebody on the spot, if you're in a meeting, for example, they can't find it quick enough on their memory shelf, stress just absolutely knocks it off, and they can't find anything on there. So that's something that they find a challenge as well. Something else that they find very difficult could be information processing. So like the video suggested, we have a left and right brain. Left is in charge of language, the right is the creative side, and we have our filing cabinet of knowledge here behind our left ear. If you are left brain dominant, you can find information in your filing cabinet of knowledge super fast. It's like driving down a motorway with no other cars. There's nothing to stop you from finding that information super fast. For a dyslexic, however, if they're right brain dominant, they have a longer journey to take. And so it's a little bit like driving down the scenic route. It's not to say that they're not going to find that information in the filing cabinet of knowledge. It just might take a little bit of time. And in real life, it might just be a little bit of a delay. Just give them a little bit of thinking time. It might be that you notice that they find the information in their filing cabinet of knowledge maybe an hour later of something that that you've been talking about. And so it's that information processing, the left versus the right brain, that sometimes they have a challenge with. When we talk about dyslexia, it's under the umbrella of neurodiversity. I have sent you a detailed document that has been compiled from our website that you can read at your leisure. But we'll just touch very briefly on neurodiversity. It's a relatively new term, but it helps to promote the view that neurological differences are to be recognised and respected as just as any other human variation. We use it to counter any negative social connotations that may still be out there. And it also makes it easier for people of all neurotypes to contribute to the world just as they are, rather than having to feel or appear that they need to fit in to other more typical communities. It encompasses all of the specific learning difficulties, or SPLDs, which very often can co-occur and overlap. So this is just a small selection of the types of neurodiverse conditions. And as you can see, very often they can overlap, but they do have those common issues that you may notice. Things like attention. Sometimes dyslexics may look like they're zoning out, but in actual fact, what they're doing is they have these kind of mind movies that they can see. Or it might be that they're having a mini brain break. Their working memory could be affected, very much linked to their memory shelf. Time management. Some people don't have the concept of time, really. And so that can create some challenges. Listening skills, organization, sensory perception could be linked to that speed of processing. So if something is really disturbing them, then they're not going to be able to focus on the task at hand. That speed of processing, if they are being disturbed by something else, it creates that stop cycle, which can really slow people down, and it can become really frustrating for them if they have a particular task that they need to do. And I'd just like you to just have a quick look at this cartoon, really. This cartoon shows that we all have different skill sets, we all have different strengths, and we all have our own challenges. And this cartoon acknowledges that, and it highlights that sometimes we put unfair expectations placed on each other. So the gentleman at the front is saying, everybody has to take the same exam, please climb that tree. Now, depending on what strength you have, you're either going to be able to do that really easily, or you will have a bit of a challenge. You might need some help. If we amend the exam, like go and swim in the lake, maybe more of the animals will have more of a chance to be able to do that. And so it conveys the need to act and innovate and think outside the box to make sure that we get the best out of all of our colleagues and our friends and our family, so that they can perform to the best within their role. If we have these practical responses, making sure that the workplace is inclusive and accessible, we also have to be diverse and flexible to make sure that we take into account everyone's potential needs and we tailor them to those specific requirements of the individual. So let's have a look at some of the indicators that you may notice in dyslexic adults. It's important to remember that everybody's dyslexic experience will be individual to them. A lot of it is to do with previous experiences. Some people will have had a very positive experience through their childhood and through their work careers. Some may have had quite negative ones. And so if they've had quite a negative experience, they may be reluctant to disclose it, or they will try to mask what kind of challenges that they are having. So we need to think about the challenges. So reading in particular, it might be that they find that when they're reading, they lose their place in the text. And it might be because if they are reading and it's a really slow rate, it's because they're trying to decode each single word as a single entity. And so that the comprehension is slowed down. So if they're losing the place in the text, something's disturbed them, they have to start again. And it's that stop, start, stop, start cycle. It might be that they experience visual difficulties, which is a co-occurring difficulty, where the text moves around. And so consequently, they might need to reread text over and over again to be able to gain that comprehension of what it is that they are reading. It might be that their spelling is affected. They might not remember what words look like. If they hear incorrect sounds, not to do with a hearing impairment, but to do with that auditory processing. Remember that processing difficulty. If they're trying to listen to something and the processing is a little bit slower, they may not quite hear something that you've said properly. So you may hear them say pardon quite a lot. With their spelling, it might be that they have heard different sounds. If they've not had that explicit teaching, for example, a good example of that is the ED ending of words. So the ED ending has 3 sounds, so d, ed, and t. depending on which word it is. If they have not had that explicit teaching of the spelling rules, then they may just write down what they hear. So they might put a t at the end of the word, for example. And similar sounds can become confused, particularly vowel sounds, if they are getting those confused. When they're listening, it might be that they have a difficulty with note taking, because what they have to do is that rate of listening, deciding what it is that they want to write down, encoding it correctly, making sure it's legible, so that they can read it again at a later date. All of that will take a lot longer for a dyslexic learner, and so note taking can be particularly difficult. If there is background noise, it might distract them from actually listening to what it is that they are meant to be listening to, and so that can be a challenge. It might affect their writing with regards to the organisation of ideas. Remember, if somebody has something on the memory shelf, they need to capture that as quickly as possible. And so if they are writing something down, it might be that they are completely disorganized in what they are writing to the reader. But what in actual fact is happening, they've managed to remember, they process something, they found it in the filing cabinet of knowledge, pops it on their memory shelf, they need to capture it as quickly as possible, write it down. And so consequently, the thought processes might seem a little bit disjointed to somebody who's reading their work. Trying to find the right word is all about trying to find it in the filing cabinet of knowledge. Handwriting and copying may be very poor. It might be that they have beautiful handwriting, but it's incredibly slow, and that's just a tactic so they don't have to write as much. It might be that their handwriting is very poor deliberately to hide any kind of spelling errors that they may not want other people to see. And so writing can be a particular difficulty sometimes. We've talked about that memory and processing difficulties already with the filing cabinet of knowledge and their memory shelf, but this can be affected by things like any kind of sequencing, really. So phone numbers, the alphabet, if they're particularly still find that particularly tricky, times tables, dates, important dates, organising themselves, that kind of thing. And so other kind of indicators might include things like coordination. It might be that they are have a co-occurring difficulty with dyspraxia, their spatial awareness, the left and right hand confusion. It might be that they get lost easily. It might incur challenges with their maths, particularly if it's some kind of sequencing. It could have a negative effect on their mental health, and that might be because of the community that they are in or they have been in the past. They might feel very reluctant to disclose their dyslexia because they assume that there's going to be a stigma attached and an assumption that they are not intelligent, when actual fact that is not the case. And it also might affect their concentration as well. So all of these together, we're looking for a cluster of these, not all of them, to look at whether dyslexia is apparent. And so if you think so and you've not had a diagnosis, then it might be worth investigating a little bit further. So how can dyslexia impact daily life? So this is what we need to try and understand. If you have all of those challenges, how can it affect your day-to-day life? Well, it could affect those sensory difficulties if there is too much noise, especially if they're trying to process sound and they already have that processing delay. If there is too much sound and they can't hear properly, that might affect their auditory processing. The other sensory difficulties might prevent them from concentrating, which slows down the process of whatever task it is that they are being asked to do. They may have that poor proofreading ability. If they don't know that they're making mistakes already, if you ask them to check their work, they're not going to know that there are mistakes there in the first place, so they're not going to be able to find them to correct them. Poor organizational skills. You know, it might be that they feel very overwhelmed. If there's too much information on their memory shelf, they might just start to go into a little bit of a shutdown. And so that poor organizational skills, they feel that overwhelming sense where they can only do maybe one or two things at a time and just focus on that. Difficulty note taking, we've talked about that already. It's that whole process, and that's really slow process stops them from listening to what they should be doing. So having somebody else or a device to take the notes for them would be really, really helpful. Lack of awareness and understanding from colleagues. I mean, you're here today, which is fantastic, but we do need to give that awareness and understanding out to the wider community so that people understand what is happening with your dyslexic colleagues, your friends, your family, and have that understanding and be able to put those provisions in place, that support in place, without being critical. It is most certainly not a reflection of their intelligence, and it's one message that we really do need to get across. It might be that they have those visual difficulties. So visual difficulties is a condition on its own, but they can often co-occur with dyslexia. There's a bit of a myth to say that if you experience the words moving around the page, or you find it painful to actually look at a page of text, that you are dyslexic. Well, it's actually a condition on its own, but very often they do co-occur. And so we need to be able to support them and understand and find a different way around to, have the text read aloud for them. All of this extra brain power that is needed to be able to go through all of these challenges can lead them with extreme tiredness, and to have that understanding that perhaps in the morning they will be able to complete a lot of the tasks. By lunchtime, maybe they get incredibly tired, and so give them a practical thing, something to do in the afternoon, maybe. But it's finding out when they feel extreme tiredness and when is the best time to work for them and what kind of tasks to give them. Those impaired reading skills, it might be that they can read particularly well, but they just need time to comprehend it. So they might just need to read things maybe 2 or 3 times, and have that understanding that sometimes they may need something to help them read it aloud, maybe a digital device. And unconscious bias as well. So I've talked about it today, or very often people say, you're dyslexic, or I'm sorry. That is, we don't want that kind of response. We don't want those assumptions. We need to bust those myths, and to realize that being dyslexic, actually, right, yes, you might have a challenge with literacy, but you'll have other positive aspects of your personality, your character, your other skills as well. And so we need to try and remove that unconscious bias. But it can lead to mental health difficulties. And so depending on what kind of experience that individual has had, it might be that they have felt that there has been a stigma attached to disclosing that they are dyslexic. They may have been exposed to bullying, or that banter that people say it's only banter, but if it's affecting their mental health, it can be really demoralizing, and which leads then to poor self-esteem. Negative kind of comments can have a real effect on somebody's mental health difficulties. So it's about being really aware of the words that you say and making sure that we eradicate all of these negative connotations around dyslexia. I just want to touch very quickly on the Equality Act of 2010, because dyslexia is not a disability, a physical disability, but it is one of the protected characteristics within the Equality Act of 2010. So it says that you're disabled under the Equality Act if you have a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on your ability to do normal daily activities. And this is where dyslexia falls into that category. So for example, if you are unable to find your way around or follow a map or look at the train timetable and so on and so on. Pardon me, it has that substantial, it's that long term, dyslexia is life long, you can't grow out of it. You can improve, but you can't grow out of it. And substantial is more than minor or trivial. And so it might take longer to do a task. Like if you have a physical impairment, then getting dressed will take you an awful lot longer than somebody who hasn't. And long term means 12 months or more. And of course, dyslexia is a lifetime condition. Which leads me up to access to work, really. If you do need to have any kind of support, then you can apply to access to work. And it helps them to stay in work if they've got that physical or mental condition or a disability, or if you're dyslexic, if it's one of those protected characteristics. Of course, that support is going to be dependent on their needs. And employees can apply for a grant themselves to help them pay for things like supporting with their mental health. It could be dyslexia awareness training for all of their employees, for example, and practical support with their work. So it might be that they need a gadget to help them with read aloud text and things like that. With regards to how dyslexic workers are affected by changes than non-dyslexic workers, if they've been able to find something that works for them or the team around them that is really understanding, just one change can really knock them off balance. And it means that their normal coping mechanisms might not quite work. And so they have to find a new coping mechanism. And it can be a vicious cycle. They start to become stressed because they're struggling to cope, but then that stress creates that difficulty to be more pronounced. And it might just be a new member of the team who doesn't have that understanding of dyslexia and has those old-fashioned thoughts about what dyslexia is, and they've just made a couple of comments and it just knocks them off. It could, and it is, I would suggest that it's in the employee's best interest to disclose their difficulties, even if they don't have a formal diagnosis. It's much better to have, to say to your line manager, I'm struggling with this. Can I, is there anything you can do to help? Is there anything that we've got in place already? Or I've seen this gadget, it would be really, really helpful for me, or I've seen this software. Can we apply for an access to work grant to help pay for it? And so it's really important to get the right support. As an employer, you invest a lot of money and time and effort to make sure that your employees are ready to work. And, you don't want to lose them. It just creates that, having to re-employ somebody else. You need to be sensitive to individual working styles, those dyslexic difficulties that are less pronounced, and to have that understanding. And if all of that support is in place, good performance is maintained. It might be that you have that discussion and the employee might want a formal assessment. You might want to go down that route. Because if you do, then it will give that full picture of their strengths and weaknesses as well. So a diagnostic assessment as an adult can work definitely in your favour. So let's have a look at some of the reasonable adjustments that are available out there. And this is literally just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of things that I don't have time to talk about. It might be that you allow them to, you give them support for their organisation. So it might be that you give them a weekly timetable on a lot each time, a particular time for each task. They may prefer a paper or an electronic planner or a diary. The benefit for the electronic one is to set reminders, those digital reminders that pop up maybe 15 minutes before a meeting, for example. Now, if you have somebody in the team who is particularly good at organising and scheduling, go to their strengths. But the dyslexic individual very often will have their own way of working. They will find something that is particularly easy to use for themselves. And it might be that they prefer to use a particular digital planner. Symbolic coding. So we all have, whichever organization we're in, we all have our own jargon, our internal jargon. It might be that you use color coding or symbolic coding or a number. For things like tasks, you might want to do a red, amber, green rating. So a red is really important. That's the top one. You may have just one of those, maybe 2 amber tasks that are coming up to the red, and green might be that you've still got some time to be able to complete that task. So those color codings can be quite helpful, and allow extra time for tasks. We usually say about an extra 25% of time, depending on what it is, and of course that individual will be able to tell you whether they need more time to do any particular tasks. So for technology then, there's a huge amount of technology on the market. There's things like speech to text or text to speech. For example, in Microsoft, for email and PowerPoint and Word and all of those, there is something called Immersive Reader, and you'll find that in the View tab. And what that can do is it will be able to read it all out, read it aloud for you. You can change the voice, you can change the background color. If you're on the web version, you can see which words are nouns or vowels of not vowels, nouns or adjectives and so on. It might be that they prefer to speak into a dictation machine or a voice app, or use the dictate function within their computer system. It might be that if they have a lot of paper documents that they need to read, there's a company called Orcam that have scanning pens. There's another company that is called scanning pens, depending on what kind of scanning pen that you would like. And what it does is it scans the text and it reads it out for you. It might be that they prefer to see an aerial view of information. So if they do use computers, then mind mapping software may be easy for them to help with putting their ideas down on paper. There's one called Inspiration, but there's lots and lots of mind mapping software on the market that you'll be able to have a look at. And again, it's finding one that is user friendly for that individual. For things like reading and writing, if you're writing emails regularly, things like Grammarly or Ginger are 2 free downloads that you can use to help with that sentence construction, the spelling and so on, and the tone of voice as well. I use Grammarly myself, and it gives you that a little emoji when you've got a good tone of the message in your typing. It might be that you prefer to have that task management or organization digitally, things like in Microsoft To Do. There is the equivalent in Google and Apple. It might be that they prefer to use sticky notes, either physically, or you can download sticky note apps these days and have the sticky notes, type on it and stick it at the front of your computer screen. So there's lots of different things like that to help you with your reading and your writing. And practical adjustments as well. So this is just for somebody who's in an office environment, but the need to focus is really important. If you have something like this, which is like a portable cubicle, then it sends a message to everybody to say, please do not disturb. I really need to focus, or I'm using my dictation software, for example, and I need to kind of block out as much as I possibly can to make sure that I can focus. Some office blocks have pods, which are very helpful as well, that you might need to book. And it might be that they need something like noise cancelling headphones. So if you have somebody who needs the noise cancelling headphones, or maybe just listen to kind of like white noise or classical music or something like that, that helps them to on a very low volume to help them to focus. sometimes you might need a little bit of understanding as to the reasons why they have their headphones in all day. I've also sent you the Dyslexia Friendly Communication PDF copy of our BDA style guide that is on our website when you get all of the resources. Do your best if you are doing presentations, a solid full background, not white, off-white. If you've noticed, this is off-white, but remember to have a solid colour. Other busy kind of backgrounds can be really distracting. Be careful as well if anybody might be colourblind. So if you have like your organisation has agreed on a particular colour, make sure that there's nobody who is colourblind who can't see that colour. And use a suitable font as well. Try not to use anything that is too cursive or narrow or old-fashioned, such as the A and the G, for example. We want to try and move away from that. So things like we use Century Gothic, it might be Comic Sans, that kind of thing. Dyslexia, what's it called? Dyslexia, Open Dyslexia font as well. So this is where you will find the Dyslexia Friendly Guide. If you go to Advice, and you'll be able to download that on our website. It gives you all the information, but you should have that in the information as well. Something else that you might be unaware of is how to do a video screen capture. If you have a Windows, Windows keyboard, then to get a screen capture, you can press the Windows key plus G. And what you can do then is record your laptop screen or your computer screen. It will be saved in your captures folder as well. And not the student, but the employee or your colleague can watch as many times as you need to. So for example, if you're giving instructions on how to find something, then something like this would be really helpful. And then you can email it or ping it over to them so that they can watch it as many times as they need to. Alternatively, if you use a Chrome base, then you can use that on the Chrome store. It's called Screencastify, which is a screen video recorder. And it's the same kind of thing again. They all do the very same, very similar kind of things for you. But this one also creates a QR code. So if you need to share it on a text message, for example, you can share it that way. There's lots of different ways. And Apple Mac, I believe there is a record of the screen as well that you can use if you use it in Apple. Remember, if you are talking to somebody who is dyslexic, allow that thinking time, that processing, and imagine them trying to navigate around the scenic route. So if you're trying to ask them to find some information in their head, understand the reasons of what is happening, give them that little bit of extra time to process information before responding. It's unfair really to put them on the spot and ask them a question. It might be that you're in a board meeting, for example. Always give them thinking time. Or if you need to, give them the questions ahead of time and let them prepare their answers beforehand. This is a really good tool for interviewing as well. So if somebody is coming for interview, they're disclosing that they are dyslexic, then offer them the questions ahead of time so that they're able to prepare their answers, even if it's just like maybe 30 minutes before the one-to-one interview, just to give them that preparation time. It might be that you would like to email audio clips as well. So instead of sending an email, because you know that they find that really quite tricky, then what you need to do here is record an audio clip on the voice recorder on your laptop or on your computer. And then you would right click and share the recording. And when you share it, you can email it. And it might just be something like, can you set up a meeting between the CEO and myself and send it off? And so things like that are just really, really helpful for those who find emails, the amount of emails, a little bit overwhelming. So how can the BDA help? So we're coming to the end. I'll try and get through this so we've got enough time for a couple of questions at the end. Have a look at our website. It's our greatest resource. It really is. And if you need that accessibility function, then it's there. You look out for this icon here. And with that, if you click on that, you can adapt the website to any way that you need to. You can change the font and the background and have it read aloud and so on. We do have our helpline. These are operated by experts in the field. So it's, we're always here to help. But because they are volunteers, that's why we are a little bit restricted to the times for the telephone. However, we do have our helpline available via email and of course our social media platforms as well. So you can always contact us through there. If you do need help with a diagnostic assessment, we do have registered assessors all up and down the country registered with us, and you can apply for a diagnostic assessment through our website. And you can tell us, you start off telling us if it's an individual assessment or a corporate assessment, and that just tells us who will be paying the assessment fee. Now, because you're on this workplace webinar, I wanted to highlight something that we offer workplaces to become a dyslexia friendly quality mark. And this is our philosophy that changing practice to accommodate dyslexic individuals results in good practice for everybody. It provides a framework of support and understanding to make sure that everyone within your organisation understands the needs of our dyslexic learners. Remember, there's around about 10% of your workforce who could possibly be diagnosed already, up to 20% if they are not diagnosed. And so it helps you give that, we help to give you those appropriate resources and the strategies to support them where they're available. In turn, it's likely to give greater levels of achievement for everybody. So the award is only issued to organisations that can demonstrate that they can provide that high quality support for your dyslexic colleagues. And above all, the Dyslexia Friendly Quality Mark is a real positive statement to let everybody know that your organisation is a real place for dyslexic individuals. We have 3 levels. We have a bronze, silver and gold. And as you can see, the bronze is committed to learning about how to become a dyslexia friendly workplace. So that's the very first step. The silver, you put in much more practice to become a dyslexia friendly workplace. And then the gold standard is that you are modeling the best practice for your dyslexic colleagues. And so it's something that is really being strived to achieve. And we're having more and more companies right across the UK who really want to try and achieve the gold standard. If you are interested in further training, we have lots of training available, either e-training. I also deliver bespoke training to organisations up and down the country, either virtual or face-to-face if that's what you prefer. And you can also always contact our helpline for a quote. You can filter the course that's most suitable for you, either for an employer, if you are in education, for example, if you are a parent, and so on and so on. There's lots of approved training on our website that you can apply for. And so, Nikki, I think we've got about 7 or 8 minutes left for questions at the end there. I'm loving all of the love, the thumbs up and the hearts and everything that we've been getting throughout today's webinar.
Thanks, Amanda, that was great.
Worry of them again.
Some lovely comments as well, and even some people offering to volunteer at the BDA, which is fantastic, and music to our ears.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we do have a few minutes, so let's try and get through some questions. So we've got some people asking about assessments and diagnosis. We've got somebody asking if they had a diagnosis from a young age, is it worth redoing this as an adult, especially for workplace and access arrangements and things like that?
If you feel that you have improved greatly and the original assessment doesn't reflect what you need right now, because obviously it might be a long time since you had that assessment, it might be worth having an update. It's entirely up to you, because it can be quite a tiring day to have that assessment, to go through all of those diagnostic tests. But at the end of the day, you don't have to. You already have that diagnosis of dyslexia. You probably know yourself what your strengths and challenges are and what kind of support that you need. So you don't really need to. It's entirely up to the individual, really, if they would like to see how they've developed and have an up-to-date diagnostic assessment.
Great, thank you. And can we give people a rough idea of how much that would cost if they're looking into that?
It depends up and down the country. I think it's probably from about 500 to about 800, depending on where you are.
Brilliant, thank you. And as you mentioned, there's lots of information on the website about that, and can point people in the right direction of who can do assessments for them. Mm-hmm. So I know it's quite a journey sometimes of how do they go about it and what it costs and everything else. But yeah, do check out the website. We've got a question from somebody saying they're a dyslexic line manager. Have you got any advice on a good way to share tasks before they're having a one-to-one, before and after, sort of following up? I know you're quite hot on all the sort of softwares out there. Is there some sort of good software that you suggest?
Yeah, so I know that Microsoft To Do, if you're a Microsoft-based company, then the Microsoft To Do calendar is really good at sharing tasks. Similarly, if you have Google, the Google Calendar can help to share tasks as well. And it's nice, those two kind of digital organizers can, everybody in the team is able to see what everybody's doing. And of course, with that, you can even like upload particular documents, put a timeline on it, be able to add comments and so on, tick when it's completed, go to the next task and so on. And you'll be able to see as well if it is fairly shared. So, you know, you'll be able to make sure that the range of tasks are shared right across the team if that is something that you are looking to do. So have a look on YouTube really on how to use things like the Microsoft To Do or the Google Calendar.
Brilliant, thank you. And I think we've actually got a webinar on our YouTube channel that's got all different sort of assistive technologies, and I think there's even more information on there. We've got a question about our helpline, and they're asking, is that for those who are not diagnosed and professionals supporting those not diagnosed? Or could you just talk about a little bit how we can help with the helpline?
It's open for anybody, really. So regardless of what background you have or what kind of question you have, please just drop us a line, and you know, whoever picks it up, if they're not able to answer directly, they will the very least signpost to somebody else who should be able to help you with whatever query it is. So please do get in touch regardless of what it is that you are asking about.
Yeah, and that's all age ranges for somebody that's starting on a dyslexic journey as a child, or if it's an adult just finding out they're dyslexic, or an employer. And you can email as well. It's not just, you don't have to phone in, you can just send in your inquiry and then navigate and help you with that. We have a question, an interesting question about is dyslexia and Erling syndromes linked?
So Erling syndrome is the same as visual difficulties or scotopic sensitivity, visual stress. They're all the same thing. So, but it, depending on who is diagnosing it, they call it different things. It's a separate condition, but it is very often co-occurring with dyslexia. And I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, if it's assumed, if you see, you know, words moving around on a text, it's assumed that that means that you're dyslexic, but it's in actual fact it's visual difficulties. But because there is high rate of that co-occurring difficulty, it can occur quite a lot. But you can have dyslexia and not visual stress as well, or visual difficulties, or Erling syndrome, whichever one you decide to call it.
Brilliant, thanks, Amanda. And actually on that, so somebody else is asking, if they're a good reader, but they have some of the other kind of characteristics that you've talked about today that could be problematic, is it worth them getting tested?
Yes, definitely, because it might be that they are a good reader, but they still need to read it maybe 2 or 3 times because the comprehension and that processing of the information in the text, or it might be that they have more of a challenge with that processing difficulty or with the memory shell. So it's still worth getting an assessment to highlight the challenges and their strengths.
Great, thank you. Actually, I've got somebody asking about, do you have to prove to your employer that you're dyslexic? I mean, presuming this is from somebody that hasn't had a diagnostic assessment, but do they have to prove it, and how would they prove it?
They don't have to prove it. With regards to access to work, if you can apply for the grant yourself. So, for example, I'm hearing impaired, so I've applied myself for a grant for a hearing device. So you can sort it out yourself. Just be mindful that you do let HR know what it is that you're doing, because they may need to contact them. But you don't need to declare that you are dyslexic, whether you have an assessment or not. You just need to be open and just say, this is the bit that I feel is quite challenging. What can you do to help to support me? Or I found this gadget, this really helps me. Can I have it as part of my working day?
That's great. Thanks so much, Amanda. I think we're actually out of time now, but that's been really, really helpful. And like we said at the beginning, we will be sharing the recording and the slides out to everybody that registered. So you can have a look back when you get a chance, or if you've forgotten something Amanda spoke about earlier, then that might help. And just a reminder that we do lots of free webinars, so do check out the events page of our website. And like I said, YouTube channel as well. There's lots and lots of free ones on there. So you might, if there's something in particular you need help with, so maybe working memory or something like that, then there's specific ones on there that might help you too. And like Amanda said, don't forget that we do have the helpline, and they are there to help for any sort of support you need, whether it's you're supporting your child, yourself, or an employee. Then just drop us a line or give us a call. And that just leaves me to say thank you so much, Amanda. We'll let everybody else get on with their day, and we hope to see you all again soon. We do run this series sort of 2 to 3 times a year, so do spread the word if you have other people that might like to join next time. So thank you, everybody, and take care.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Nikki. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Have a good day.